Now, what you are about to experience is possibly the most detrimental program in broadcast history. And so, it is with great privilege and sense of duty to humanity that I present the Creech and Frantz Show, with your hosts, CJ Creech and Joe Frantz.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. It's so good to be here, Creech. And what do we got today?
We have got today the films of Kurt Russell, which is, for a first show, I think probably the best topic to discuss, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to know more about Kurt Russell?
No homo, of course, but probably one of the most gorgeous guys walking the face of the earth with one of the most incredible careers at that.
And one of the most wonderful heads of hair in show business. I would kill for that man's hair.
Yes, I would indeed kill for that hair too.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to learn everything you ever wanted to know about Kurt Russell. You're going to learn about his early Disney movies, his later career, his family, how he got started in the show business, and you're also going to learn how him and Goldie Hawn got arrested the first time they had sex. So we're gonna spill all the beans here because we are Hollywood insiders that don't actually live in Hollywood. All right, here we go. Creech, he was born on March 17th, 1951, the son of Bing Russell. Now, Bing always wanted to be an actor when he was a kid. And as a boy, he studied drama, and he was dubbed the unofficial mascot of the New York Yankees. He became friends with players like Lefty Gomez and Joe DiMaggio, and Lou Gehrig was weakened by illness and gave him the last bat he used to hit a home run before his retirement. Imagine being a kid, being Kurt Russell's dad, Bing Russell, and you get that gift. I mean, what a cool thing that must have been for him.
You can't just get one of those, off the street. That's plus with such a legendary player like Lou Gehrig.
So when Kurt Russell's mom was pregnant with Kurt, Bing decided to move the family to California so he could pursue his career as an actor. Now, he had one skill that would perpetuate his entire career. Do you know what that skill is, Creech?
I don't, but I'm definitely interested in finding out.
He could ride a horse, which is that's actually a hard skill to come by. And there was a lot of westerns were really big at the time. So he was working with Ronald Reagan, John Wayne, Loretta Young, Yul Brynner. He was a supporting actor. And actors didn't get paid all that much, and they also didn't get royalties. So he worked and worked and worked every day. He was a deputy sheriff on Bonanza for 13 years. He was on over 800 television shows and got killed 126 times on screen.
Oh, wow.
You've been in a couple smaller films. Have you ever died in a movie?
Not yet, and I can't imagine it doing over 100 times either. That takes some skill there.
That's got to be fun. I mean, but it's also got to be disappointing because a lot of these were serials, right? So it was like Television's Rawhide, Maverick, Gunsmoke, Adam 12, Death Valley Days, The Untouchables. So it's like every single time he went to work, he's like, well, I guess they're not going to use me again. I'm dying.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to get shot again.
In 1962, young Kurt Russell, at the age of 10, got his big break, his screen debut in the Elvis Presley movie, It Happened at the World's Fair. He got to kick Elvis Presley in the shin. That's pretty damn cool.
That is pretty cool.
So Kurt goes on. He got his first series, The Travel of Jamie McFeeters, from 1963 to 64. And he starred along with Charles Bronson, which is pretty badass to have Charles Bronson and Kurt Russell in the same vehicle.
And that was Jamie Feeders?
The Travels of Jamie McFeeters was based on a Robert Louis Taylor book. I never read it.
I haven't either. I almost thought you said fetus in the beginning. I was like, whoa, they're getting crazy with those titles.
That would be a better title, I think.
McFetus. That sounds like something they'd serve at McDonald's.
Let's go to McDonald's and get the McFetus burger.
Exactly.
Did you hear about the Michael Jackson burger?
No, I did. What's on it?
It's a 40-year-old piece of meat in between two 12-year-old buns.
Oh, God.
Oh, he was Jungle Boy. At the age of 13, he played Jungle Boy in an episode of Gilligan's Island in 1965.
Was this like just a supporting role, or?
Yeah, it was just like one time they met like a jungle man, and then like another time like a Colombian dictator came to the island with a gun, and one time Jungle Boy came to the island, and that was Kurt Russell. It's pretty cool.
It's definitely seeming like in his early career so far, he's definitely hitting the big juggernaut shows.
Yeah, I mean things are getting better for him. So in the meantime, you had a guy named Tommy Kirk, who was in a lot of the Disney movies. Okay, he was in Old Yeller. He was in the Hardy Boys. He was in The Absent-Minded Professor, Adventures of Merlin Jones, and The Shaggy Dog. And something was happening to this kid, Tommy Kirk. He was changing. He was getting older, and he was very extremely gay. And a lot of the Disney folks were very scared because you could tell he was gay on camera, they felt. And he was having a lot of emotional problems, which affected his life. So they needed someone to fill those Tommy Kirk shoes. So in 1966, they signed on Kurt Russell to a 10-year contract.
Yeah, that's a long contract.
Yeah, you know what that is? I didn't think about it that way. I was too hung up on the whole gay thing.
Well, that is one thing. Yeah, I can understand why.
I mean, that's got to be hard to be a child actor and be gay, you know?
I can imagine. I mean, nowadays probably not so much, but back in the day for sure, when it wasn't accepted at all and nobody talked about it, I can imagine it being even more rough.
He was going to like a gay beach, a secret gay beach, and meeting men, and he had a lot of drug problems and stuff like that. So he was having a lot of problems. But anyway, films were going through a lot of big changes at this time, Creech. Okay, so America was selling tons of color televisions, and they wanted to offer brilliant color television shows. They were done with black and white. And Disney offered a way for television to keep Americans home rather than endure the expense and inconvenience of going to the movie theaters, okay? Disney had the best of both worlds, actually. They made small-budgeted Technicolor family shows with a broad appeal, and they had well-developed adult and children and teen characters that the whole family could identify with. They would take these low-budget movies, and they would do limited theatrical runs and then air them in full rotation on the wonderful world of Disney. So Disney wanted to reinvent their Merlin Jones character that was Tommy Kirk. So rather than call him Merlin Jones, they started calling this character Dexter A. Riley. The first movie he was in was called The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. And it's the first movie ever where a computer melds minds with a human being. So Kurt Russell's this teenager, he's in college, and he has to move this computer. He's screwing around with it. A surge of electricity goes through, and he becomes one with the computer. Our first cinematic cyborg.
Cyborgs. Those are always good, especially in the 60s. All the sci-fi.
Yeah. The follow-up to that was Now You See Him, Now You Don't, which was a Kurt Russell invisibility movie. And followed by The Strongest Man in the World, where him and his friends found a strength potion. Made everybody super strong. So these films had Joe Flynn as the dean, which were great, and also Bing Russell as a gangster, muscle-bound sidekick named Angelo, who was the right hand of Cesar Romero's character, A.J. Arno. So you had Kurt Russell's father, Bing Russell, you had Cesar Romero, you had Joe Flynn, you had Jim Backus from Gilligan's Island. These are great films.
And that would be interesting for me to check out because I don't think I've ever seen Cesar Romero in anything but the Joker.
And you'll actually be surprised how old he was at the time. I think he was in his 60s, and he had gray hair. You know, you think of the Batman Joker from the 60s as like, you know, maybe 35, but he was in his mid-60s at the time.
Huh. Well, I remember watching it, and they painted over his mustache because apparently he didn't want to shave it off. So I thought that was always hilarious.
Yeah, and you could totally tell. They couldn't really hide it that good.
Nope. Couldn't hide it at all.
Now, interestingly enough, as early as this is in Kurt Russell's career, there's actually a Quentin Tarantino reference. Kurt Russell said in The Hateful Eight, "I'll be a monkey's uncle." Okay, this was actually a mistake by Quentin Tarantino. You know how Quentin Tarantino loves to put all the little throwbacks? For example, he had Lawrence Tierney say dead as Dillinger in Reservoir Dogs because he played John Dillinger in a movie. So he actually had him say, I'll be a monkey's uncle. But Quentin Tarantino messed up because Kurt Russell was in a monkey movie by Disney named The Barefoot Executive. But it was his predecessor, Tommy Kirk, that was in a Disney monkey movie named The Monkey's Uncle.
He messed up on that one.
Okay, so now he's getting older. He's finally out of his Disney contract. It's the mid-'70s. Kurt Russell tries out for a major part in a major movie. Do you know what that is, Creech?
I'm going to guess Star Wars.
He tried out for Han Solo in Star Wars.
You know, I could see it. It'd be a little different, I think, from Harrison Ford's portrayal, but you know, I could see it. He definitely had the machismo to do it.
Have you seen the audition tapes? You can see it on YouTube.
For sure.
It's really cool to see him. Because he plays it... You know, a lot of people who see these tapes think that he wouldn't be that good. But it was his first tryout. I mean, he went and was just reading a script without knowing any of the context. He didn't know any of the story or the parameters of the script or even really what he was trying out for, other than he knew it was some kind of space epic. So knowing what you know now, if you could change time, would you put Kurt Russell as Han Solo in Star Wars rather than Harrison Ford?
Kurt might have been too badass for that movie. Because I'm just imagining like a Snake Plissken-esque Han Solo. Yeah, that'd be a different kind of movie. I feel like it may be a little darker.
What if he played it more like Wyatt Earp, like when he was in Tombstone? What if he played it like that?
Kind of torn. I feel like he would have definitely brought a cockier aura to the character. But in some ways, having Kurt Russell, since he's such a, obviously he was a terrific actor, but he was a very good-looking dude. I mean, still is, obviously. If he were cast as Han Solo, I think that would have gotten rid of most of the drama from the original series, because before, you found out Luke and Leia were brother and sister, it was like, okay, is Leia going to go with Han? Is she going to go with Luke? But, like, if you had Kurt Russell there, I don't really think there would be any sort of competition, because obviously she would go for Kurt Russell's Han Solo. I mean, you've got Luke, or Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford. They kind of, you could see how maybe a throw up could happen, but there's no competition at all with Kurt Russell. So,
that's true.
I think in that way it worked better story wise.
That's a pretty good point. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, like there goes that entire like will they or won't they story arc for the first movie.
I would much rather date Kurt Russell than Harrison Ford in their primes. I mean, come on, look at the guy.
Nope, I agree with that hands down, for sure.
The reason he didn't get the part was because George Lucas couldn't make up his mind. He was trying different combinations of different characters and working out their chemistry. And Kurt Russell finally sat him down and said, listen, Mr. George Lucas, sir, I'd like this part, but I gotta work. I can't hold out for this not knowing if I'm gonna get it. George Lucas couldn't decide. He said, I just can't give you a definite answer, Kurt Russell. So Kurt said, listen, I'm gonna do this show called The Quest with Tim Matheson. But then he goes on. Kurt Russell goes on in 1979 for his first John Carpenter movie. And this movie was called...
Ooh, it's a throw up. I'm gonna go with... Was it The Thing?
No, it was Elvis.
Elvis. Oh, wait. Yep. I'm getting my stuff mixed up.
Elvis was his first John Carpenter movie. It was a made-for-television production. He had actually worked with Elvis before, as, he did in the 60s in his first film. It happened at the World's Fair, where he kicked Elvis in the shin. And he had a little bit of time to study Elvis's real character, but something bad happened while they were in pre-production of this film. Elvis died while they were making this movie, and Kurt Russell was freaking out, man, because it's one of those things where it's like if a star dies and then you come out with a product with that star's name in it, everyone always is quick to the corpse isn't even cold in the grave, and you're already exploiting his dead body, making money off of his death. So it was a real risk, but everyone was already signed on. They were already in production, so they kept shooting. Bing Russell, Kurt's father, played Vernon Presley, Elvis's father in the movie. That's pretty badass.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember many movies, I mean, off the top of my head, where it's like her father and child actors are actually in the same film together. I think I remember Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie and Jon Voight. But yeah, that's pretty badass to be playing father and son when they are in actuality father and son.
Yep, that was pretty awesome. And actually, Kurt Russell thought that he was going to sing in this. So he was singing his heart out, practicing all the songs. But he didn't know it, but he was tone deaf. He couldn't sing for shit. So remember Alfalfa and the Little Rascals? He couldn't sing, but he thought he could.
Yeah.
Well, it was like that, and like 3 days before they were supposed to shoot his singing scenes, John Carpenter said, "This guy can't fucking sing. We gotta have him lip sync." So they had someone else record the songs, and he came in ready to sing, and then they were like, "No, you're lip syncing. You're not singing," because no one had the heart to tell him that he couldn't sing. So it was on the set of Elvis in 1979 that Kurt Russell met his first wife. Her name was Susan Hubley. He married her, and they had their first kid in 1980. It's weird how you meet people you end up marrying, and sometimes how fast it can happen in life. They say that the people that you marry, you mostly meet them through friends of friends or at work.
I met my now ex-wife at work, so I would completely agree with that.
So during Elvis, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter get to talking. And Kurt Russell says, "I really like the roles I've been getting. I've been very fortunate, but I'm starting to get older. You know, I'm looking at some of the people who were childhood actors at the same time I was. You know, you had Dwayne Hickman, who played Dobie Gillis. You know, you had like Annette Funicello and a lot of these kind of teen actors that he was coming up with, and all their careers were kind of falling away." Kurt said to John Carpenter, he said, "I got to do something to change my career. I need something that's going to change how people look at me and give me a little bit more range." And so John Carpenter said, "I have a movie for you. It's a script I've been working on called..."
I'm going to go with, is it Escape from New York?
It's Escape from New York.
Yes, got it.
What can we say about Escape from New York that's never been said before? I mean, you got the sympathetic character, Snake Plissken. He's a killing machine. It's a very dark tone. It was Kurt Russell's idea to have rock the eye patch, which was a big pain in the ass. At first, they thought it was his great idea to have an eye patch. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to seem very vulnerable. You know, I have this horrible injury that no one can ever see." But they're starting to shoot the action scenes, and he's like, "I can't see a goddamn thing. This sucks. This is the dumbest idea I've ever had." He also started wearing eyeliner in that movie.
Well, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
So at least he could just say, well, you know, that was an 80s thing.
Yeah, I mean, he wore a lot of eyeliner in his movies since then, you know. It's just such a great movie, right? You got Lee Van Cleef, you got Ernest Borgnine, you got Donald Pleasance, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton, and the beautiful Adriana Barbeau. Oh, my God. Oh, remember her in Swamp Thing?
I do. I loved Swamp Thing. I don't know. There's a couple of favorite parts. One was obviously the score to that movie was phenomenal. I loved the music, and I've been a huge fan of Donald Pleasance, so anytime seeing him in anything other than Dr. Loomis is always a treat, you know.
Oh, well, actually, there's a scene with his wife at the time, Susan Hubley. So he meets her at the beginning of the movie. She's like, "You Snake Plissken?" Like everybody in the movie knows who he is. "You Snake Plissken?" So she kind of takes him into this, looks like a deserted saloon. And then those creatures start ripping their arms up from underneath the floorboards and pulling her in. That freaked me the hell out when I was a kid.
I remember being horrified as a kid of, I believe somebody gets raped in the movie? Or they try to rape somebody?
Well, no, there is also a rape scene. It's like he's walking by all these punks in this, like, corridor. And there's just a girl getting shoved back and forth. And actually, you're not even sure if it's a rape scene. It could be some weird, kinky sex thing. Like, she seems like docile, like she's on drugs. So you're not really sure if it's a rape or sex. That freaked me out, too, when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, whoa, what is going on? Because I had no idea of what rape was at the time. So I was like, what are they doing? And, my parents were like, "Oh, they're just roughhousing." I'm like, uh-huh.
Oh, that's what your parents said? They were roughhousing?
Yeah. It's funny because they'd let me watch like all the R-rated movies, but then they'd give me these bullshit answers when I'd ask for what was going on in some of the riskier scenes in these movies.
Yeah, my parents had me watch Death Wish when I was a kid. I was like, what the like this is like a violent rape scene. I was like, what is happening? Why would you, even as a kid, I was like, why were you letting me watch this? I'm like 8 years old. But did you know that Escape from New York was not a financial success?
I did know that. It got a cult following later.
It got its second run on cable. Back then, cable was, just started coming around. But during the early 80s, it really started making a big push in the suburbs. And that's when it started to make money. Later, when it came out on VHS, that's when it really started to make money. And more people saw it. And it just goes to show, sometimes you do a movie that people don't understand. With independent films or mainstream films, a lot of people don't understand a lot of movies you make at first. So I want to back up a little bit just because I wanted to get the 2 John Carpenter movies in a row, the Elvis and Escape from New York. But he did a movie in between Elvis and Escape from New York. He did Used Cars, 1980. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale of Back to the Future fame made this awesome movie. You got Jack Warden as he played 2 roles in this, the good twin and the evil twin, Roy and Luke Fuchs. You had Joe Flaherty of SCTV. You had Michael McKean from Laverne and Shirley, who later on went on to Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. You had Grandpa Al Lewis of the Munsters. This movie, again, it didn't do well in the theaters. Okay, so it came out like 2 weeks after the hit comedy Airplane came out. And Airplane was such a big deal, everyone was seeing that. And no one saw Used Cars. But it came on cable. Now, back in the early days of cable, you had what was called the Cable Guide. It was a little booklet that was sent to your house once a month with all of the cable channels and all the movies. And you could look up the movies and you could see what types of movies they are. You could see what they were rated, but why they had that type of rating. So there was adult language, there was adult situations, and there was nudity. This movie had nudity in it, so if you were a kid or an adult, you would look up every movie and this one has nudity, I'm going to watch this. If you're a kid, you're going to wait your parents out of the house, you're going to watch this movie. So everybody saw Used Cars, and it is such a funny film. And actually, Kurt Russell says this is his favorite part he's ever played.
Wow. That's a big statement for sure.
Such a great film. And again, you got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale of Back to the Future making it. I mean, it was amazing. So we got 1981. He's the voice of Cooper in Fox and the Hound.
That movie traumatized me as a kid.
It did? Why?
Because I thought it was going to be this happy-go-lucky Disney movie like most of them are, and then one of the animals dies and just destroyed me. I can't remember which one because it's been so long, but I never could watch it again after that. It traumatized me.
Isn't there a death in like every single Disney cartoon?
There was, but I hadn't seen them. Like I still to this day haven't seen Bambi, but I watched that one thinking it was going to be so great on VHS, and then I wound up crying my way through the end. It was bad. Man. It was like what Marley and Me did to the kids nowadays when they went to see that at the theater.
Speaking of Disney, did you know, another fun fact we didn't touch on, did you know that Disney's last words were Kurt Russell?
I did, but that's only because you told me, and I still find it very interesting. Like, out of everything, this guy who's created this huge empire has kids and could say many other things about his life and chooses to end it with Kurt Russell.
Yeah, it's like in Citizen Kane at the end. It's like Rosebud, he says, and then he dies, and no one ever knows what Rosebud was. It's the big mystery of the at the end, of course, you find out, spoiler, that Rosebud was a sleigh that he had loved so fondly as a child. So I wonder what the affiliation was with Kurt Russell and Disney.
Hopefully nothing too weird.
Yeah. You know what? I thought you're not the first person that says maybe he was a child molester and molested Kurt Russell, but I don't know. That's so far. I mean, just because you say that, a lot of weird shit goes through your mind when you're dying, I'm sure. I don't know. Maybe he wanted to leave him some money. That's what I'd like to think.
I mean, I could give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I could see why somebody'd be like Kurt Russell when they're dying. I mean, I mean, even back then. So, I mean, I give him an out for that.
You know what? When I die, I want to say Kurt Russell right before I die. That's my goal in life, is to say Kurt Russell right as I'm dying and to write it down, and then someone could put it on my tombstone. So here we are. It's 1982. John Carpenter and Kurt Russell get together again for a third John Carpenter film called The Thing. Now, let's get serious here, okay? Let's talk about The Thing, okay? First of all, you have these new advents in cinematography that allows you to kind of see into the dark areas. So it's like there's no longer like heavy shadows and just beautifully saturated colors. You have a wide range of tones and a color palette in the cinematography that allows you to, quote, see into the dark areas, like Alien and Blade Runner. And you had these new film stocks which allowed you to shoot in low-light situations. Okay, so you have that going for it. You have the dark Kurt Russell character, R.J. McReady. You had these characters it was a very claustrophobic movie. It was a situation of paranoia. And it was also a remake.
It was, from the Thing from Outer Space. Out of all my Kurt Russell movies, The Thing is probably my number one favorite. I just love the entire universe of The Thing. I continued with the franchise when they released that video game in like 2002, which was the sequel. And then I saw the movie, which wound up being revealed as, spoiler, a prequel, the one that was released in 2011, I think. I just love the paranoia, the atmosphere, and the dread. It's not, there's a guy in a hockey mask coming to kill you. It could be anybody. That's what I think stuck with me the most. It just makes this even more scary.
Not only could it have taken over anyone who you're with, but little do you know, it could have taken over you. The characters really weren't sure if they had been taken over, or Creech, maybe you and me are taken over and we're just like a ghost in a shell of a person that used to be us. And maybe we are all things. Maybe everyone in this world has been taken over by some otherly being. It's such an interesting concept. And you have the practical effects. Oh my God, these are some of the best practical effects in this movie that I have ever seen in my entire life. The Thing, once it comes in contact with someone, becomes that being, but it uses the other beings that it's been in contact with in other worlds, in this world, and uses them as substages to get to its desired morphing goal, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Whatever the hell it wants to become, it goes through a wide range of other creatures it has stored in its genetic memory. And the DVDs and Blu-ray bonuses are amazing. They spared no expense with exploring every single scene of this movie.
Like you were talking about the practical effects, I mean, I even to today, all of that, rewatching it, it all holds up amazingly well. I still can't figure out how they did half of that with the head crawling away.
That's one of the movies you get on Blu-ray just so you can pause it and see each frame in high definition. The effects are flawless.
I just want to interject really quick. I think that's just a testament to, probably going to butcher his name, but I'm just going to say Rob Bottin. Might be Bottin. He was the special effects guy, and he actually wound up concerning himself so much with doing the special effects and everything that he wound up having to go to the hospital. He didn't finish up the last part of the movie, and Stan Winston came in and did the special effects for the last couple things. That's why in the credits there's like a special thanks. He didn't want the credit for doing it for the last thing. That's why he said just put me as a thanks. Because he was like, that's Rob Bottin's stuff, because Rob went to the hospital for like ulcers and everything just from worrying and overthinking and stressing, how to pull off all of those feats that he accomplished in the movie.
And again, the movie didn't do well at the theater. Again, another Kurt Russell movie doesn't do well until it comes out on cable TV, because it came out right about the same time as E.T., a competing science fiction movie. So it's almost like he can't win until cable television and video cassette and Laserdisc.
Exactly. Yeah, it's he's striking out pretty bad right now. But thankfully, he does continue on, and he starts getting some more quicker hits. But also his older filmography becomes more appreciated as well, because those are fantastic films.
All right, so that brings us to 1983's Silkwood. And I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Creech, but it has a powerhouse duo here. We got Meryl Streep, Kurt Russell, but we also have Cher, Craig T. Nelson, Fred Ward. I mean, come on, Remo Williams and Kurt Russell in the same movie? I mean, what more do you want?
Does sound like a pretty nice cast. Is this a musical by chance?
No, it's not a musical, but the film is actually written after a true event, okay? So the premise is that on November 13th, 1974, Karen Silkwood was an employee of a nuclear facility. She left to meet a reporter from the New York Times with some very important information about a possible nuclear meltdown, and she never got there. Okay, so she was disappeared. So this Meryl Streep character, she works at the nuclear power plant. She finds some flaws in it. She goes to expose it, and she disappears. It's a very tragic film. It was nominated for 5 Oscars, and it had another 7 wins and 8 nominations.
It's a pretty good amount of nominations. You said it didn't win any Oscars, though?
I don't know. I don't know everything about the goddamn film, but it says another 7 wins and 8 nominations. I don't know what that means.
That's still pretty good, and I know in our discussion so far, there hasn't been many Kurt Russell films that got some Academy Award nominations, so he's definitely moving up, for sure.
It's a very socially important film because, at the time, it was the 80s. Everyone's scared of, everyone has this Cold War hysteria going on. Everyone's scared of nuclear bombs going off. We had televisions the day after, which broadcasts about the same time, which showed a nuclear holocaust we had with the Russians. We had the 3 Mile Island tragedy happen about the same time, where there was a big spill of radiation throughout the entire Pennsylvania tri-state region. So it was a very timely film.
Actually, I hate to date myself, but all of this was right before I was born, and I'm actually glad I was born after this, because that sounds like a frightening time for sure.
It was. I used to actually have nightmares that the Russians were bombing my high school. So right around the same time, Kurt Russell is getting a divorce. He was married to Susan Hubley, however you say it. They were married for 4 years. So they met in 1979 on the set of Elvis, and divorced by 1983. It's a very sad thing when you see a Hollywood divorce.
Oh, yes.
Now, at the same time, okay, you have Goldie Hawn. She is, at this time, going through great strides in her career. She was in, a couple pretty big movies, but she was just in a film called Private Benjamin, which was a huge hit and a great film. So she kind of had carte blanche when it came to what kind of movies she was able to pick for herself after that. So now she was married to Bill Hudson of the Hudson Brothers. And the Hudson Brothers had a show called the Hudson Brothers Razzle Dazzle Show. And it was a sketch comedy music show, which, to give you an idea of the vibe of the show, how silly it was, like the opening title sequence is them all loading into a car, and one of the characters is in a gorilla suit. Okay, so they also had a 1983 movie called Hysterical. She was going through her divorce with Bill Hudson. So Bill Hudson and Goldie Hawn had 2 kids, and do you know who those kids are, Creech?
Yes, Kate Hudson, who's still acting today, and Oliver Hudson as well.
Yeah. So, again, you have this kind of like Hollywood royal family in the making. Here's where the kind of the real fun stuff starts in his career. Okay, so he was chosen as a possibility to be in her 1984 movie Swing Shift. And it takes place in the 1940s. She runs like an airplane plant that helps the war effort. So Kurt Russell comes to read for the part. And he sees her, and to this day he doesn't know why he said this in such a forward way, but his first words to her were, "Wow, you got a great figure." Which is an interesting introduction to someone who's so famous and
very true. But he wasn't lying. I mean, she did have a great figure for sure.
So we asked her to go dancing, and he actually didn't know anything about dancing. He had just danced a little bit in his Elvis movie. And they go out dancing, and no dancing was done. They had a couple drinks, and she says, Kurt, I have an apartment I've been thinking about buying not too far from here. You want to go check it out? And
Uh-oh.
so they end up, is right. So they end up going to her empty apartment. And she says, and I quote, "We eventually found our way upstairs looking at imaginary furniture, and we were in the imaginary bedroom now, and we are realistically having sex when the police walked in." So the police saw that there was someone in there, knew that the place was supposed to be vacant, and the cops walked in on Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell having sex on their first date.
That's kind of pretty epic, and I would love to have a first story like that. That sounds like a pretty fun first date for sure.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it happens. Stranger things have happened. And she says, quote, "I was loose. I knew him before, but it was consummated on the first night," she says. So good for them. And, you know, they've been together ever since. So, I mean, when you meet someone special, sometimes it pays off to consummate it on the first date.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
moral of the story.
You just got to find that nice, polite girl who puts it out on the first date for sure.
Yeah, good luck. I have yet to meet that girl.
I haven't
oh
either.
Oh my God. I have the worst taste in women. I'll tell you that right now. Every time I meet a girl and I think it's going to work out, I just admit to myself, this is never going to work, because if you don't do anything to screw it up and she doesn't do anything to screw it up, it's going to get screwed up anyway by some circumstances beyond any of your control. But maybe I'm just a fatalist.
No, shenanigans usually do happen.
And so now it's 1985, and he's in a movie called The Mean Season with Mariel Hemingway. I've never seen this film. And then in 1986, he's in The Best of Times with Robin Williams. This film is it's very funny, and it's very touching at times. So basically the premise is Kurt Russell was the quarterback for their high school team. Robin Williams was supposed to catch the ball that would win them the big game against the opposing town. They come from this town of Taft that's never won anything. This town has always had disaster. And the one good thing that's supposed to happen was they were going to win the big game against the neighboring town. And Robin Williams drops the ball and spends the next 12 years hating his life. And he re-rigs history so they can replay the big game against all of the old football players. So everyone comes back, they get into shape, they replay this game.
It's something that I should definitely check out, not only because it has Kurt Russell in it, but Robin Williams is another terrific actor. I can't recall seeing a bad Robin Williams movie.
A funny little side story, Robin Williams apparently was beginning to unnerve Kurt Russell when he had to stay in character in between scenes, because Robin Williams is always making jokes. He always had to be the center of attention. And he was always, doing his impersonations and doing his voices. And so finally Kurt Russell turns to him and says, "Robin, I think you're a very funny man. I love you and your humor, but I can't stay in the character with you doing this all the time. So if I turn around and walk away in the middle of one of your soliloquies, please don't take it personally." And that's got to be a hard thing to say to somebody who you're working with.
Exactly, yeah. Nowadays, if something like that happened, there'd be all sorts of TMZ breaking news posts and drama on the set or whatever, but I could see Robin Williams being kind of that kind of funny guy on and off the filming.
I've worked with some people who need to be the center of attention, and sometimes it is very difficult because you're trying to work and you have to juggle feeding them the attention that they need on the set and also getting your own work done. Sometimes it can be extremely distracting, and if you call the person out, sometimes a big fight will happen. I know it's happened to me, so.
Yeah.
But now it's 1986, and guess what? Kurt Russell reunites with
Goldie Hawn?
No. We got Kurt Russell reuniting with John Carpenter for their next film, Big Trouble in Little China. Now, this movie didn't do well at all. And yet another Kurt Russell movie made by John Carpenter that doesn't do well. The film cost $25 million to make, and it made $10 million at the box office. And again, I think the reason is because I have a library of over 3,000 DVDs and Blu-rays. I don't know how to categorize this film. If you're going to sell this, or you're going to see this movie in a theater, you got to go back to 1986. All you have are little blurbs in the newspaper and a couple pictures in some magazines. And I remember when I was a kid looking at a magazine article about this, and I was like, what is this? Is it a martial arts movie? Is it a monster movie? Is it a science fiction movie? Is it an action movie? Is it a superhero movie? But it kind of rides the fine line on all of those genres to make the perfect storm. But people in 1986 were not ready for the marriage of all those genres.
It's commonplace nowadays, but yeah, I could see that back then they might be a little bit hesitant, but thankfully it did develop a cult following. And like you were saying, it seems like most of their collaborations, even though they're fantastic films, they just were misunderstood for their times. But thankfully, with VHS and then DVD and all that, we've been able to pass it on to new generations, and it's still building fan bases. I would never like to see a sequel. I know they were trying to make a video game sequel at some point, but thank God, I don't think they got very far with that.
But did you know that Mortal Kombat's Raiden was designed after one of the characters, the one that shot the lightning out of his hands? So there is kind of a video game about this in a way.
Yeah, a very successful one at that. I did not know that, but that makes Mortal Kombat even more awesome.
But now, let me ask you this, and this is a heated debate between so many people across the internet and social media. Who could win in a hand-to-hand combat fight? Jack Burton of Big Trouble in Little China or Snake Plissken of Escape from New York?
That is a very serious question. I'm just going to go with my gut and say Snake.
Yeah, I mean, he had all that special forces training, so I think that he might be able to win, but I think Jack Burton would be smart enough to poke out his one good eye.
Very true.
There is one other fun fact about this film. It was they started to go over budget, and there's a fight sequence where Kurt Russell gets a machine gun and points it up at the air and screams, "Let's get him!" or some kind of battle cry, shoots at the ceiling, plaster comes down and hits his head, and he's unconscious for the entire fight. The reason they did that was because fight sequences take days to do, and they couldn't afford to pay Kurt Russell any more money to hang out on the set while they choreographed the fight. So they just said, let's have him unconscious throughout the whole fight. He'll wake up at the end, and we can forgo having to film any scene work and fight choreography with him.
That's hilarious. I did not know that. That just makes it even better, you know? Just
Yeah,
making
yeah.
do with whatever you're budgeted for. That's awesome. I love hearing stories like that.
Oh, by the way, I worked with Dennis Dunn, who played Wang in Big Trouble in Little China. I actually got a chance to work with him on a very, very, very low-budget film that I was a director of photography on that actually never was released. And I got a picture taken with him, and I was so excited to get the film back, you know, because there was no digital back then. I think this was like year 2000. And I was so excited because I got a picture of me and Dennis Dunn, and we're holding up our fists just like Big Trouble in Little China. You know, you go to the photo mat, and you get the envelope, and you're sorting through the photos, dying to get to that one. And we both blinked at the same time. And it's just us both with our eyes closed with these goofy expressions. And I was so disappointed. It was my one big shot to be associated with anyone from the cast of Big Trouble in Little China.
Well, you've got one up on me on that. I don't even think I'm a 1 or 6 degrees of separation from anybody on that. Well, technically now I am. Now that I know you,
Yeah.
now I finally got my connection there.
So now we have 1987's Overboard. He reunites with Goldie Hawn on screen.
One of my favorite
and
films.
Overboard is one of your favorite films?
It is. It is. I love this movie.
No, it's not.
I'm dead serious.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. My mother had the biggest hots for Kurt Russell, so like I saw this movie a lot as a kid. I never got tired of it because it's just the story's not that great, but there's just something about it. I love that movie, and it still holds up to this day.
In this movie, he deceives her, right? He's a carpenter, and then she doesn't like the work he does or something, and doesn't pay him,
Yeah.
and then she hits her head, gets amnesia, and then he convinces her that he's the husband or something.
Yeah, and then in the end, they wind up actually getting together. She leaves her real husband.
Isn't that sexual assault?
Yeah, I assume he's breaking plenty of laws there. I mean, maybe she developed a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. He even took her out of the hospital, and he wasn't related. I don't know if that's a charge too. She winds up, it was the '80s. It's this hokey movie, so they don't care about the plot that much. But I don't know why. It holds a soft spot in my heart. I love that film.
Yeah, the 80s were a different time. Which brings us to 1988's Tequila Sunrise, where he teams up with Mel Gibson. Michelle Pfeiffer's also in this movie, but I'm a big Mel Gibson fan, and to see Kurt and Mel in a movie is awesome. And, it's about like a drug dealer who wants to go straight or something like that. But, man, in my opinion, this movie just does not hold up. It is so 80s with all the long lens shots and the saxophone music every time there's like an emotional scene. And I tried watching this movie very recently, and I was like, never mind.
They're not wearing pastel-colored suits in this, are they?
No, it's not. It's definitely not a Miami Vice type of thing. But it's pretty bad, in my opinion. And then we have another movie called Winter People, which I have never heard of or seen.
I haven't either. It sounds like some kind of like rednecky horror movie.
It looks really good. It takes place in a small town in 1934. He moves in with his daughter and, meets a girl, and they have an illegitimate baby. It's a period piece. But that brings us to Tango and Cash. Now, at the time, of course, Sylvester Stallone he was huge. He was the biggest box office male star with the Rambo and the Rocky and all this stuff. Kurt Russell actually wasn't the first pick to be in this cop buddy movie. But I think this is the greatest cop buddy film of all time. And at the time, you had a bunch of cop buddy movies coming out, right? You had Lethal Weapon. Didn't you have K-9 with the cop buddy dog movie with Chuck Norris?
Then you had Heat, I think. Was that the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and, was it Belushi? Red Heat or something like that?
Yeah, that was Red Heat. Yeah, and you had Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal and Running Scared. And you had a slew of really low-budget cop buddy movies. But I just love Tango and Cash. The stunt work is great. The budget was there. It did really well at the box office. So the plot of the movie is Tango and Cash are two really good, hardworking cops who sometimes don't do things quite by the book. They're a little too fast to draw their guns. They've arrested all the bad guys in the whole city, and they get accused for a crime they didn't commit. And so now they end up in prison. And at one point, they're surrounded by all the inmates in the prison, have taken over the prison, and they're chained up in the basement. Like in that one Rambo movie where he has his hands chained up over his head. They're surrounded by all the inmates, and Kurt Russell goes, "Must be the welcoming committee."
I don't think it's a surprise party.
"Let's get out of here."
I don't think they're going to let us.
I mean, the banter between the two, every line is a punchline. So it's almost like Sylvester Stallone in everything Sylvester Stallone ever done versus Big Trouble in Little China's Jack Burton in a cop buddy movie. And the deliveries are so funny. The intonations, all it is So I love this film. I can't say enough positive things about it. It's one of the best films in history, I think.
Well, I have to say, I've seen this once when I was a kid, and I don't remember barely anything about it, so I can't really offer my insights on it. But I will say, of the late 80s, Gone Overboard was probably my Tango and Cash.
Fair enough. Oh, one more Tango and Cash fun fact. Kurt Russell's father, Bing Russell, remember him from the beginning of the show? Well, he has a cameo as a van driver. So when you want to watch Tango and Cash, keep your eye out for his father, Bing Russell.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to do that.
And which leads us to Ron Howard's Backdraft. So you got De Niro, you got Kurt Russell, you got Donald Sutherland, Jennifer Jason Leigh. I mean, bang up cast. They actually had a theme ride at Universal Studios based on this big picture. Yes. And I don't remember liking this movie.
I loved this movie. Once again, my mother was obsessed, so generally most of the movies I had to watch plenty of times. And this movie is just sad. Just so sad. I was young, and I just remember being so distraught over the people dying in the movie. I was like, oh, this is so rough. It made me... I was one of those kids that thought, maybe, I might want to be a firefighter when I grow up. And then I was shown at an early age Backdraft and quickly decided that it was not for me.
Oh, the cinematography was beautiful. I will give it that. Just the way that they captured the nature of the flame. Which brings us to 1992's Lawful Entry. You got Kurt Russell and his wife. They had a break-in at their house. They get help from a local cop design their security system. The local cop is Ray Liotta. Little do they know, Ray Liotta is a fucking psycho. And he basically stalks them. It's a very scary film because everyone's scared of a crooked cop, right? Because they have all the power over you.
Exactly.
So, you really see a very human and vulnerable side of Kurt Russell in this one.
And I don't know why all these film characters always trust Ray Liotta. He just always looks like the least trustworthy guy in any film.
Yeah, I know. Would you trust that guy? If he moved in next door, I'd be like, oh, man, the next 20 years are going to suck.
I'd be like,
this guy's nothing but trouble.
Yeah, I would not go to his house to borrow a cup of sugar, that's for sure.
All right, now we have one of the most strangest films on the Kurt Russell palette, Captain Ron. This is such a strange film. So he goes back to Disney. Disney's like, hey, we want to make another movie. We're going to put you with Martin Short. Martin Short is a guy who inherits this yacht that was owned by Clark Gable. I didn't even know why Clark Gable is involved in this or why that's important. But it's like such a fucking weird movie, especially because it's a Disney movie. In fact, there's guns, there's drugs, there's a third world government, there's pirates. They end up contacting these gun runners. And it's like Captain Ron was like having sex. I actually have to rewatch this one.
I saw that as a kid. I remember I liked it as a kid, but then again, I liked the Power Ranger movie as a kid, and when I saw that recently, that was just a giant turd.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have yet another movie that did not do well in the theaters that is now considered a classic. Tombstone. We got Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, Sam Elliott as Virgil Earp, Bill Paxton as Morgan Earth, Powers Booth. I mean, all these legendary actors all in one film. It's a very high-budget film, beautiful cinematography, great acting. It culminates in, I think it was like a 45-second gunfight that happened at the OK Corral.
Truth be told, out of all of these genres, probably my least favorite, even since I was a kid, was Western, because I had to watch a lot of Bonanza growing up, and Gunsmoke, and I didn't really like it, so I think that kind of soured me on that. But I've heard from a lot of friends that have seen that Tombstone was really, really good.
Yeah, I actually did a National Geographic archaeological show at Tombstone, Arizona. They let us in the OK Corral. We actually reconstructed the battle based on some shells and some bullets that we found in there.
It sounds pretty wicked.
Yeah, and I have a couple of horseshoes that we found on the ground too. So I'm not saying they're actually Wyatt Earp's horseshoes or his horse's horseshoes. I'm just saying. Okay, so now I have a surprise movie he was in that he's uncredited for. Robert Zemeckis' Forrest Gump.
Well, that's a big movie I've seen many times. I'm trying to... Who did he play in that movie?
He was an uncredited voice of Elvis Presley, which again, we got our Elvis Kurt Russell connection.
Yeah.
I don't know why they wouldn't credit him in there. I think maybe if they credit him, they would have to give him royalties. There's probably some weird SAG, Screen Actors Guild rule. If they use his name to promote the film, they would probably have to pay him more money. So I think they thought it wouldn't be worth it, but it would be nice to give an homage to Kurt Russell.
Yes, that's a pretty epic homage.
Now we have 1994 Stargate. This was such a big movie. This was huge. First of all, they had a lot of practical effects. They hardly did any digital. They were just on the verge of marrying digital and analog composites. You know, the whole movie culminates in a scene where they had 1,200 extras. We're talking in the desert. You know, you have to ship all these people water out into the middle of the desert. I've worked in some extreme heat situations during my film career. I've worked in India and in Texas where it's like goes up to like 120. You can guzzle water all day and never pee because it all gets evaporated from your body. And they're all wearing all these robes. One of the biggest things they had to do was have people whose job it was to take brooms and erase all the footprints in the sand of 1,200 people after every single take. Some of the sets were so hot that they couldn't build them during the day because their tools would get scorchingly hot. They couldn't even pick up their own tools to build some of the sets. I don't know whose decision it was to make that in the desert, but it was a very expensive one.
I can imagine, yeah. I mean, that's just insane. In the end, though, it all worked out. I mean, it did pretty well and launched tons of series like Stargate, SG-1, and all these others that came of it. So it did create a lasting franchise, obviously without Kurt Russell in it, but I don't think they were sweeping the desert for the later stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, I have a funny story associated with this. So it was like 1995. It came out on Laserdisc. My friend Tim's dad had Laserdisc, and he was very big on you had to go in, and before you hung out with Tim, you had to go pay respect to his dad and hang out with his dad and talk to his dad. So the first night we were there, we wanted to go to the bar. We were young kids. And his dad said, hey, I just got Laserdisc. I got one movie. I got Stargate. You want to watch it? So rather than go to the bar, we had to watch Stargate with his dad, which is pretty cool, seeing Stargate on Laserdisc. He had a great sound system. So I go the next night, and he says, I'm about to watch Stargate. Here, why don't you... And we had to watch the goddamn movie again. And then the third night I went over there, he was about to put in Stargate, and Tim goes, we gotta go, Dad. He would watch Stargate every night because Laserdiscs were like $50, $60 at the time, and he couldn't justify buying a second movie.
Oh man, dude, that's hilarious.
And he never had anything to eat either. I remember he had pickles and Ritz crackers that were like 10 years old. Because he wanted anything to eat, and he would come, and it would be dill pickles and these Ritz crackers that were so stale. Anyway, that brings us to 1996 Executive Decision with Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal. Now, I've heard that Steven Seagal is not easy to work with.
I've heard that too.
I can't imagine if there was any drama. Like the entire cast of Saturday Night Live said they have nightmares. He was definitely the hardest guest to work with they ever had on that show.
Oh, wow.
But have you seen this movie? I haven't seen it.
I haven't, because I'm not a big Steven Seagal fan. So if I saw his name attached to it, I'd be like, I don't know. After Under Siege, I mean, most of Steven Seagal's movies to me were kind of the same thing. He was kind of like a one-trick pony when it came to film. So I was like, I've seen one or two of them. I've seen pretty much most of them.
Yeah, Marked for Death was, I think, Steven Seagal's finest film. Now, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, at this time, they really want to revisit the Snake Plissken character. It's been like 17 years since Escape from New York. So they got together, they pooled their money. Kurt Russell actually helped produce this film. And they wanted to remake Escape from New York. So this is not only really a sequel, they've also remade it. So it takes place in LA, and it's like the city of Pompeii in ancient Greece. There was a whole city of people who knew there was an earthquake, but they all convinced themselves it would never happen. And it happens. And the president's daughter is like a Patty Hearst character, the daughter of William Randolph Hearst, who went off to rob banks and stuff like this. So the daughter of the president gets inducted by these gangs. The gangs have now taken over post-earthquake apocalypse Los Angeles. And what do you have to say about this movie?
I remember it actually being a big deal down here, at least. I remember I wanted to see it because of all of the commercials and everything. There was a lot of promotion that I remember that went into this.
Yeah.
I think all in all, it's a very good movie. It's been 20 years since that movie came out, and now they're talking about remaking it again. But I have high hopes for this. I'm just going to hope and pray, because right now Robert Rodriguez is attached to direct, so it's in capable hands. I know it's supposed to start shooting this year. Even at its hokiest, you can't really go wrong with the Escape series.
John Carpenter says he likes this movie better than Escape from New York. I mean, dude, you got a bang-up cast in this, right? You got Steve Buscemi, you got Peter Fonda, Cliff Robertson, Stacy Keach, Pam Grier as a transsexual. That was very strange. I don't really understand why you needed Pam Grier as a transsexual when you already have Pam Grier. But you also have Bruce Campbell in this movie. And some of the weirdest CGI I have ever seen. I mean, at the beginning, he has to go take, this super fast, submarine vehicle through the water. It looks like a Lara Croft, like a Tomb Raider type of video game. Like, it doesn't even look like they tried to make it look real. It looks exactly like a 90s video game. There's some interesting parts, though, during that sequence, and you can see Universal Studios and Capitol Records sunk underwater. And I know that the studio execs love seeing this shit. Any kind of homage to Hollywood. And also Jaws comes up and tries to bite his submarine. So it's like you have an homage to Jaws. Remember Back to the Future 2 when the digital Jaws came and almost bit Michael J. Fox? It looked worse than that Jaws. If you remember, so the shark still looks fake. It definitely that was such a weird film. But John Carpenter says he liked this film better than Escape from New York. So take that to the bank. Which brings us to 1997 Breakdown. This is a really cool movie. It's very strange. Kurt Russell and his wife, they're leaving their house. They don't really have a lot of money. They have this car that they've kind of sunk everything into, this nice ass car. And I think like he's lost his job and she's looking for a new job, and they get involved in a very corrupt town that preys upon people who are passing through and taking everything they can, extorting them for all their money, kidnapping them, raping them. It's like an endless cycle of frustration when you watch this, because every time he tries to call the authorities or do something to get out of all this trouble that they're in, being abducted, it gets worse and worse.
I don't think I've seen that one. The name sounds familiar, though. Some of his movies have like just these titles that just seem so familiar, but yet not 100% sure if I've seen it.
Brings us to 1998 Soldier. Speaking of generic titles, we have Soldier of 1998. This is a very sad film to me. It's a science fiction film. Kurt Russell plays an old genetically modified person who was engineered towards being a soldier, kind of like that book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, where people are genetically engineered to fulfill certain social roles. So he's been trained ever since he was a baby to be the perfect soldier. And now comes the next generation of genetically modified human beings who are now fulfilling this role. There's a very human side to this person with no emotions. I mean, these super soldiers are the kind of person who, if you cut off their hand, they'll quick put a tourniquet over it and keep fighting you. You know what I mean? They're trained not to feel pain, any emotion. But there was a lot of emotion in his character. He was able to portray a very human side. Okay, so that brings us to 2001. Now we're in the 2000s, and we have a movie I've never seen called 3,000 Miles to Graceland. Okay, so it looks like a crime drama. It's Kurt Russell and Kevin Costner and Courtney Cox and Kristen Slater, Kevin Pollak, David Arquette, John Lovitz, big cast. And I never saw this film because I got this confused with Honeymoon in Vegas with Nick Cage. So for years when I would see this movie, I would just quick look at the title and think it was the Nick Cage movie and think it was some stupid movie that I never would have liked, some moronic comedy. And I have not seen this wonderful Kurt Russell film for all this time. So you got to tell me about it, Creech.
I can definitely tell you about that because I actually saw that movie in theaters. But as a little side note to the movie title mix-up, I had a female friend who was trying to rent, back when Blockbuster was still around, 28 Days with Sandra Bullock. And she accidentally rented 28 Days Later, not knowing that it was not the same movie. And so she like gets through half of the movie, still trying to figure out when the hell Sandra Bullock is coming. And I'm like, she's not. It's totally not the same movie. And she's like, oh, good God, I didn't think she would do anything this scary.
I got one better than that for you. I was at a Blockbuster, and the woman comes in, and she goes, oh, I just wanted to see if my movie's in. So she gives her name. Now, she's buying this movie. She's not renting it. And he goes, here it is, ma'am. Robin Hood, Men in Tights. And she goes, oh, I just love Kevin Costner. I've been waiting to see this forever. So she got the Mel Brooks Robin Hood Men in Tights and thought it was the Kevin Costner movie and took it home. And you've seen that movie, like you can actually get through the title sequence and think you're actually seeing the Kevin Costner movie because it has the arrow shooting through with the flames and everything. So, and did I say anything? No, because knowing that she went home and started watching this movie and realized it was a comedy was priceless.
Exactly.
So,
I would love to see her reaction in the we're men in tights. I would love to. Oh man, that's hilarious.
All right, so tell me about 3,000 Miles to Graceland. What'd you think?
I loved it. I mean, it gets a lot of flack. There's so many bad reviews of this movie. I'm just like, I don't know. It has action. It has drama. It has Elvis, once again, the Elvis connection. I mean, he dresses up as Elvis. They all do. It's got this, rockin' 2000s, I guess you could say, metal soundtrack. It's a fantastic movie, and I enjoyed it. It's kept me on the edge of my seat. These guys are trying to get one over, and without spoiling, Kevin Costner is like the bad guy, and it's, basically it comes down to Kevin Costner versus Kurt Russell, and there's just a lot of badassedness that happens at the end. I don't know. I remember going to see it with no expectations. I was like, yay, I'm going to go see a rated R movie with my sister. That's about as excited as I was for it. But it was awesome. And there wasn't even any boobs in it. So as a teen, I was like, hell yeah, this is still awesome regardless.
Now, is he killing a lot of? Are there a lot of deaths in this movie? Because I see him with guns on the poster.
There is deaths.
Oh man, I gotta see this. I'm an idiot. I hate myself. But you know what? For not seeing this movie, I'm actually happy because now I get to enjoy Kurt Russell more rather than before. That doesn't make any sense, but I'll take it.
Exactly, and you get to see another iconic portrayal of Elvis. Because he does it in this, he's decked out in the full gear in the end. But yeah, it'll keep you on the edge of your seat. There's a twist at the end that's fantastic. The only thing that I say that hasn't held up with that movie is in the beginning it starts and there's this fast-paced rock music and the opening titles, and it's this horrible CG scorpion fight. And it looks really, really bad.
Is it worse than the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull Gophers?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I've seen that movie once, and I completely moved it out of my mind because that movie's not Indiana Jones to me. I'm sorry. It lost me at the refrigerator scene, and it didn't get me back. It's definitely worse than Shia LaBeouf swinging with the monkeys in Indiana Jones. I do remember that scene. I think Shia looked more realistic swinging with those monkeys on the trees than those scorpions did, looking like they were, actually fighting.
Vanilla Sky. Okay, we got Tom Cruise, Kurt Russell, Cameron Diaz, Penelope Cruz, Jason Lee, directed by Cameron Crowe. I got to admit, I own this movie. I've seen this movie, and I don't remember a goddamn thing.
I have to second that. I saw it on Encore or something like that when I was like 14, and I was like, it's not bad, but I don't remember like anything else that happened in it.
It's like one of those other universes, like simultaneous universes happening at once or something like that. And is this world a dream or is this the real reality type of movie, like a Matrix type of thing, right? Yeah, God save us from those type of movies. Now we have a movie called Interstate 60, Episodes of the Road. I have no idea what the hell this is. I've never heard of this, but we got Michael J. Fox in it.
Sounds like a show that comes on History Channel.
Yeah, I know. It does. It sounds like one of those. It sounds like a shitty reality show.
Ice Road Truckers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So now we have what I feel is, I won't want to say my favorite Kurt Russell movie, but I feel his second best role other than Used Cars is Dark Blue. This movie, although it's a 2002 film, it takes place during the Rodney King riots. And it's about an old school cop who will kind of do anything he can to get a conviction, planting guns on people, illegal shootings, an old school, what they used to call a good cop. A cop who would never rat out another cop. A cop who was willing to lie and cheat and steal. If he had a feeling the guy was a bad guy, he would frame him just to get the conviction. That kind of cop. This is just such an engrossing film, and it really pulls you into the time period and the mood. I love this film. I can't watch it enough.
Because I love like recreations of stuff like that. Like I know they recreated the LA riots also for Straight Outta Compton. No, two different movies, but same subject. I enjoyed like seeing all of that stuff.
Very dark crime drama. Very dark. They did this one right by calling it Dark Blue. Miracle, 2004. This movie had 2 wins and 4 award nominations. Kurt Russell as Herb Brooks, who was this hockey coach who put everything on the line to win the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team when we were against the Russians back then. I actually remember those times. I remember it was always a fierce struggle against the Russians in the Olympics. But I got to say, I am not a hockey fan, and I have not seen this film.
I am on the same exact boat.
Well, this brings us to one that I do love. So in 2005, Kurt Russell returns to the Disney universe in this awesome film called Sky High. So it has Kurt Russell, Kelly Preston. The premise of this film is there's a superhero family. There are superhero families all over LA. No one knows they're superheroes because they all lead double identities. But at home, they're all superheroes. So they all walk around in their capes and stuff like that. And during the day, when the parents go off to their normal jobs and then go to change their identities to fight crime, the kids go to a superhero high school. And this is such a fun movie. I love this film. I laugh every time I watch it. There's great effects. There's great stunt works. Disney did a great job with this movie. You don't hear too much about this film, but I recommend it strongly.
I don't believe I've seen it all. However, a couple years back, in one of my many trips to the CC's buffet back then, they used to play it a lot, so I would catch bits and pieces of that in between stuffing my face full of pizza, which I've regretted. It did look good, so I'll definitely have to check that one out too. It's nice to know that there's so much more Kurt Russell out there that I have yet to bear witness to.
Well, now you have one that I'll never bear witness to. It's 2005's Dreamer, inspired by a true story. Yes, that's the name of the film. It's one of those horse movies, the horse racing, and horses, although they're magnificent creatures, horse racing is the most boring thing in the world to watch live or in a movie. I don't know. They say this is one of the 10 best horse movies. I don't know what that means, nor do I care. But it had 1 win and 5 nominations. That means anything.
That's a double negative. Best horse movies? There's no such thing. And I do have a story with that as well. While it was in theaters, I turned 17, and so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go see Jarhead. So I really wanted to see that movie. I wasn't driving yet, so my sister took me and for my birthday and paid for the ticket, and her boyfriend came along. But while we saw Jarhead, he decided that he wanted to go see Dreamer. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me right now? And we go and see Jarhead, and Dreamer's a little bit longer, so we have to wait for him to get out. And I just remember him looking at me afterwards. He's like, I should have just saw Jarhead. And I'm like, yeah, you should have.
Wait a minute, this is your sister's boyfriend, and you're tagging along with them on a date, and he goes to a different movie?
Yeah, my sister was taking me out for my birthday, but he was coming with too because he wanted to go see a movie. But at the last second, he was like, I don't really want to see Jarhead. And so he somehow settles on, out of the 8 movies that they have there, on freaking Dreamer.
Wait, but that's not the main point of the story. The main point of the story to me is that your sister's boyfriend ditched her to go watch another movie when he could have spent time with her?
Yes. Needless to say, they're not together anymore. but yes. And he wanted to watch the the PG rated Dreamer.
How insensitive can you be? Dude, I would never... look, I've had my head up my ass on many a date. Don't get me wrong. I've said the wrong things. I've done the wrong things. I've fucked a lot of things up in my relationships. But I would never just leave my girlfriend with her little brother and go to a different movie. So basically, you went on a date with your sister.
Yes, well, she treated... Yes, kind of, but it was my birthday. She was treating me. But yes, in some weird way. Well, we are in the South, so technically I guess it's not as frowned upon.
Oh, man.
But I did want to touch upon 2006 Poseidon.
I really don't like big-budget Hollywood remakes of classic films, like the Poseidon Adventure, which I love. But I actually didn't know that Kurt Russell was in this film, so I haven't seen it. Can you tell me a little about it?
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that in most cases with remakes, especially, remaking something that doesn't need to be remade. But I feel like in this one, like with technology actually getting better since the Poseidon Adventure, it helped out in increasing the size and scope, and it does have a fantastic cast in this movie, and I know Kurt Russell's gone on in interviews to state that this was the second most dangerous movie that he's worked on in terms of stunts. I think he said the first one is still Backdraft. The Poseidon, he actually had to basically drown in one of the scenes and, depend on his stunt supervisor to get in there and give him air before he actually died. I watched it again yesterday and the day before. I watched it twice. I think it still ages pretty well. It still tells the basic tale of people trying to get out of a ship that's been overturned by a rogue wave. The CG on the ship itself is pretty fantastic when you're looking at it on the outside. Some of the stuff that happens on the inside, you're like, some of that hasn't aged too well. There's terrific acting. Kurt Russell is one of the main characters. He's actually the father of Emmy Rossum, who a lot of people know as Fiona in Shameless, but she's been in Day After Tomorrow and all this. Those other movies as well. But he's a former mayor and firefighter. He's retired, and he's taking his daughter and her boyfriend on this cruise when just everything just goes to shit, obviously, once this wave hits. And he's one of the group that decides that they don't want to just sit there and wait for help, that they need to get off the ship now. And it's a fantastic film. It's a PG-13 film, but it is very violent. You see impalings and all sorts of stuff I didn't normally expect to see in a PG-13 movie, but it's fantastic. And one of those that, once again, that was only a year before Death Proof, and it was just one of those I watched and I was like, holy shit, he's still got it. Because, I mean, he's swimming long distances, he's doing this, doing that, these stunts, and he did most of his stunts. It's pretty. I would highly recommend it because I enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done.
Wow. All right. Well, I guess I know what movie I'm gonna order on Amazon tonight. Jesus, that was a bang up review,
yes.
Man. So now we have, oh my God, 2007. We got Death Proof, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, come on. What more do you want?
Yes, this is one of my greatest Kurt Russell movies for sure. I got to see this probably about a month before it came out at a Weinstein exclusive pre-screening. I worked at the theater around this time too, so most people didn't even watch Death Proof. They saw Planet Terror and thought that was the end of it. They left because they got pissed. They thought the movie was messed up.
Yeah, because those movies were released at the same time. So they were released as Grindhouse, and it was supposed to, basically, the two movies were supposed to mimic low-budget 70s exploitation genre films. So back at the time, you had a lot of race car movies, and you had a lot of cheap science fiction movies. The experience was basically supposed to mimic seeing a double feature in the 70s. And part of the gimmick in Death Proof, the Kurt Russell film, was that the print was supposed to look messed up because a lot of the prints back then were. So you're saying that with all the frame skipping and all that stuff, people actually thought that was a projection problem?
Yes. They would see, I remember in Planet Terror, there's this scene where they're literally talking, and then there is a little cue that says, missing reel, sorry for the inconvenience, theater management. And then it cuts to all hell's broken loose, and have no clue what's going on. And they thought it was legitimately our fault, and that we had just messed this print up so bad and everything. And it was kind of hilarious just to see the people's reaction to it, which is why it didn't do too well, I think, at least here in the States, is because they just didn't get what they were trying to do. I know in some of the other countries around the world, when it was released theatrically, they wound up releasing them individually because some of the other countries didn't have that grindhouse tradition, and they released extended versions of those movies instead. Which I'm usually one that's definitely against double dipping when it comes to DVDs and Blu-rays and everything, but Grindhouse, I've got the Blu-ray that has the theatrical edition, which is just the Planet Terror, then the fake trailers, then Death Proof, and then the two individual DVD releases, which are the extended versions of both of the movies. And it's just an amazing, amazing experience. I think Grindhouse is probably top 5 of my favorite film-going experiences seeing that movie. I have this giant 10-foot banner that has both Death Proof and Planet Terror on it, and on one side's Rose McGowan, and on the other's Kurt Russell lighting up a cigarette, and it's probably the most badass thing I own. Yeah,
I mean, you had all of your signature Quentin Tarantino dialogues-driven scenes, brilliant action sequence. That's a one-of-a-kind film for me, and I've seen that film over 100 times. I will never get tired of it.
Kurt Russell just killed it as stuntman, Mike. I mean, he pulled it off, and I just was completely blown away by this film.
Something interesting happened, though, during the making of that film. A lot of people think that this was Quentin Tarantino's and Kurt Russell's biggest mistake. They attribute the fact that he wasn't in a movie for a couple years because of the stigma that went along with the character he played in this film. And that is not what happened at all. When he was making that film, there was a scene that he had to wait for them to block traffic during one of the stunt scenes. And so he was there in his car, and he was looking out into a grape vineyards. So he's looking out at this vineyard, and he has a dream of something that he's been wanting to do for a long time, and that was to make his own wines, to have a wine company. And so after the movie, he made a couple calls to some friends of his who were investors and stuff like that, and they decided to make this company called Gogi Wines. It's just delicious. They were committed into making quality wines. They didn't just want to make a shitty wine and slap his name on the label. And they were describing to him the different vineyards they had. And the vineyard that he was looking out in during that scene in Death Proof was theirs. They actually owned that vineyard. I don't know if I believe in fate or kismet or karma or dreams come true, but there's something very special about that story.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to 2007's Cutlass. He plays Kate Hudson's father in this movie. And, she always says that Bill Hudson was not a father. Although it's a real father, she always says he was not a father. She considers Kurt Russell her real father. And so it's interesting to see them both in the same movie. Then we go to 2011's Touchback. I don't know. This is a football movie. I don't know anything about this movie. Basically, a man looks back 15 years into the injury that ended his career as a promising high school football player, which is a lot like his movie The Best of Times. So he plays the coach. Now we're at 2013. We have a movie called The Art of the Steal. He plays Crunch Calhoun, a semi-reformed art thief, and he agrees to get his gang back together for one last heist. And I admit I haven't seen this film. It seems like a lot of fun.
I have not seen it either, but it definitely, in that description, it sounds like it definitely has promise.
So, 2014, there was a great film which debuted in the Sundance Film Festival called The Battered Bastards of Baseball. And so, remember at the beginning of the show, we learned all about Bing Russell and how he had he owned a baseball team and he was in all these movies and stuff. So, this movie is a documentary about Kurt Russell's father, and Kurt Russell shares a lot of his personal stories in this film. So if you'd like to know more about Kurt Russell through his own words, you got to check this movie out, The Battered Bastards of Baseball. They meticulously went through and used all kinds of great archival footage, and this is such a brilliant documentary. Kurt Russell fans have got to see this. And which brings us to 2015's Furious 7. So he plays Mr. Nobody. And I got to tell you something about these Fast and Furious movies. I remember seeing one of them because for some reason they're real popular. Although I don't know anyone who's ever seen one of these movies or likes these movies. I don't know what the audience is, but apparently a lot of people see these movies. And I remember watching one of these movies and I'm like, I've never been so bored in my entire life. It just not that they're bad movies, but there's nothing about fast, cool cars and motorcycles that appeals to me.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit I liked the first one. It has aged horribly. I tried watching it recently, and obviously you can tell pretty much most of the car stunts were computer generated, and so it looks like hot garbage. But like after the third Fast and Furious, it just they got away from the fast and the import cars and the racing aspect of it for the most part, and it's just been heist movies from 4 all the way to 8 pretty much. It's basically the same movie, everyone. I thought they would end it once Paul Walker died, but they're still going. They just had the 8th one. They said there's going to be 10 total. Plus they're doing spin-off movies now. It's just, I wish this franchise would die.
Yeah, I just don't. I've never been on a motorcycle. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like. I will never go parachuting. The only way I'm going to go parachuting is if I'm on a plane and it is on fire. That's the only way I'm going to get in a fucking parachute. I'm not a thrill seeker. I don't like fast things, so I don't get the whole cool fast cars movie genre. But what the hell do I know? 2015, Bone Tomahawk. Now, this is a genre that you're not too excited about. This is a Western. But, this is a very, very interesting film. The premise of this is it's the Old West, and there's a race of people that have been kind of overlooked, that are dying out. There's only like a couple hundred of this rare race of human beings left. And they're cannibals. They're very primitive. And they're starting to encroach on the towns, and they're killing people. I've never seen a movie like this. I really enjoyed watching this movie.
Yes, so I have not seen it, but any movie where a lot of people are getting massacred is usually a plus in my book. So I may have to check it out for that fact alone.
And now we have The Hateful Eight.
I have
2015's Quentin Tarantino Hateful Eight.
Full disclosure, I have not seen this movie. I've seen one or two parts. I've seen the part with Channing Tatum. And it's one of the ones that I'm trying to force myself to watch because it is a Quentin Tarantino movie and I love Tarantino. So eventually I will force myself to watch this one. Sometimes I just have to psych myself up for films. Like it took me, literally, I bought The Lord of the Rings when they came out on DVD and it took me 10 years to watch them. On DVD, they sat wrapped in plastic for 10 years before I finally got to them. And this is going to be one of those movies I think it may take me a while to get to see it all at once, but I definitely do want to give this one a look.
I know exactly what you mean. With certain movies, you have to be in the perfect mood to watch them. This is a very interesting film. So it's like, look, you got Michael Madsen, you got Tim Roth, you got Bruce Dern, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Kurt Russell, Samuel Jackson, and this is basically an Agatha Christie movie or a Charlie Chan movie. A weird mystery. It's like, you know those Charlie Chan movies where he's like, everyone in this room have motive for killing Mr. Taylor, but Mr. Taylor only have a one killer. Eventually the murder makes sense and you're trying to figure out who's in on it and who's privy to it, who's a victim in the room, who's an innocent bystander, who's there by happenstance. So it is a very, very interesting murder drama. If you like Murder, She Wrote, you'll love The Hateful Eight. The 2016 Deepwater Horizon.
I've not seen that one. I know that one's the one with Mark Wahlberg, where he that's his.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like he's got it. There should be a based on true story Mark Wahlberg genre because he does a lot of based on a true story movies, but I have not seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kurt Russell got a lot of praise for doing this film. So any kind of disaster movie that has a true story behind it, I'm all in. Now we got Guardians of the Galaxy 2017. It's a humongous hit. It's a franchise. It's not even a movie series anymore. Yeah. I mean, you got Sylvester Stallone, you got Vin Diesel, you got Chris Pratt. I mean, Jesus Christ.
My good friend Michael Rooker. It's actually probably one of my favorite movies this year so far, without a doubt.
Oh,
without a doubt. I mean, the first Guardians of the Galaxy was not bad, but I felt like it was a little overhyped. I thought that, because there was so much praise, I was like, okay, it was good, but I didn't think it was that great. This one was head and shoulders better than the first, and they used some of that technology that Marvel's used before with the X-Men movies to make them look younger, some of the actors. So there's a scene in the very beginning of this movie that's supposed to take place in the 80s with Kurt Russell. They made him look like he did in the 80s. It's fantastic work. Everybody does a phenomenal job. There's not a weak portrayal in this movie, and like I said, Kurt Russell just killed it. At first I was like, I like Kurt Russell as an actor, but I was like, I don't know, Kurt Russell in a Marvel movie, I don't know how that's going to play out, but what do I know, apparently, because he did a phenomenal job.
I agree with you. Okay, so that brings us to May 4th, 2017, Creech. I mean, Russell and Goldie Hawn, they did it. Their crowning moment. Russell and Goldie Hawn received stars in a double star ceremony on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for their achievements in motion pictures. All right, so there you have it, everybody. The films of Kurt Russell.
It's been a great time. It's absolutely flown by, for sure. I mean, and it's always nice to scroll through memory lane when you have a varied and awesome selection of movies to discuss. This is a fantastic actor, and I've been honored to be able to discuss his entire career and learn new stuff about him, and even get even more admiration for this terrific actor thanks to you today.
Wow. All right. That was very heartfelt. So, Creech, let's pay some bills here real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, let's say you're a comedian or you have a cool new podcast, you have a game app, you have a startup company. You need a really cool graphic to spread across your social media and the web to promote what you're selling. Well, I got the answer for you right now. Don't have your brother-in-law do it. You want to go to Instagram and hit Torelli Pics. That's TORELLIPICS. Torelli Pics. I'm not even allowed to mention the major celebrities that he's done work for, but you can see it all on his Instagram. His price is right. His turnaround is fast. He's as professional as it gets, and he's awesome. check out Torelli Picks. Trollipics. Torelli Picks. So, Creech, let's talk about Main Man Flavors hot sauce. Okay? I mean, do you ever go over a buddy's house and you're kind of expected to bring a cool gift? Or it's somebody's birthday and you want to send them something that's not too generic, that's pretty special? Or let's just say, you know, a hot sauce fan. You want to go to mainmanflavors.com. Main Man Flavors. Okay, you want to try their wild blueberry habanero hot sauce. This not only brings you the heat, but it brings you more flavor than you could ever want from a hot sauce. It's delicious. So you get all the awesome heat you're looking for in a hot sauce, but you get the flavors. That's why it's called Main Man Flavors. MAINEMANFLAVAHS.com, Main Man Flavors. Started by two great American entrepreneurs that want to deliver a great product. Main Man Flavors. What more do you want, Creech?
Right? Yes. Let's keep it spicy.
Let's keep it spicy. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And we haven't picked the topic for our next show, but you're going to want to check it out. And if you got a moment, don't forget to subscribe to us on Twitter. I'm at Joe Franz Rules. That's JoeFrantz Rules. And Creech.
And I am on Twitter as well at CJCNOV88 and on Instagram at Creech Creative.
Thanks, everybody. We love you.